welcome back to goldstocktrades.com. Today we have a new and special guest with us, Tony Baresi. Tony is CEO of Triumph Gold, which can be traded as TIG on the TSX Venture and as TIGCF on the OTC. Thanks, Tony, for being here with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jeb, and thanks a lot for having me.
Tony, before we discuss the exciting drill results that have come out from this season up in the Yukon, I'd like for my listeners to hear about your background and what you have done to bring Triumph Gold to where it is today.
Sure, Jeb. So I graduated with a geology degree in 2004. And from that time onwards, I've been working in mineral exploration. And I was also picking away during that time at a PhD that I completed in 2015 in economic geology. I was first brought on to look at the properties that Triumph Gold has in 2016 through my own consultancy. So I was brought on as a sort of independent person to look at the properties. And at that time, Triumph had not done any exploration for a couple of years. And that's because they'd really gone gangbusters, like just crazy, doing about $35 million worth of exploration on their Freegold Mountain property between about 2006 and 2012. And that culminated with the development or definition of 3 resources, but those resources weren't high enough grade to demand a capital investment for a mine and a mill. So the company sort of fell flat for a couple of years. And when I was brought on, it wasn't to look at those resources at all, but rather it was to step back away from those resources and to see if there was any potential for pure exploration, something that hadn't already been discovered on the property. And that was the kind of thing that management at the time thought might add new shareholder value rather than continuing to do definition drilling on basically a sub-economic set of resources. When I did that review, I identified some potential that I was really excited about. So excited about, in fact, that I actually left my consultancy to join the company at that time as the VP of Exploration. I presented those exploration opportunities at a technical conference in Whitehorse, the capital of the Yukon, in November of 2016. And Goldcorp was in the room. They had just bought Kaminak for about $500 million for the Coffee deposit, which is just up the valley from us. And they loved the ideas that we presented at that conference. And that was one of the main catalysts for them making a $6.3 million investment into our company, buying 19.9% of the shares.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting, Tony. And this area, this gold copper district in the Yukon, is beginning to really get interest from the majors. You mentioned the Coffee Creek project, which is owned by Newmont Goldcorp. You also have the Casino project up there, Western Copper, and there's about, I guess, $360 million for upgrades to infrastructure in the region. So this is really a whole exciting new district that is emerging. Could you highlight to people that have never been to the Yukon or haven't heard the recent news or new to the gold sector, what's going on up there in this new district?
Sure. So, Yukon really is a top-tier district, and the majors are realizing that. Just in the last couple of years, we've seen involvement by major mining companies in a bunch of different companies and involved in the Yukon. So we've seen deals with Kenross and Agnico and Barrick and Goldcorp, all up in the Yukon, and a bunch of the other majors are sniffing around up there as we speak. And the reason for that is that, well, first of all, there's a bunch of metal. Everybody knows about the Yukon gold rush, but there's also lots of other metals up there as well: copper, molybdenum, tungsten, and it's a district that's really mining friendly, and exploration friendly. There are a lot of First Nations in Yukon that have favorable outlooks towards mining and development. There's increasingly good infrastructure. There's government that is pro-mining and development and eager to facilitate whatever they can to aid in economic development within the territory. And so we see all of these projects that are advancing really rapidly. An example of that is, well, right now, there's a brand new mine in Yukon, the Victoria Gold's Eagle Mine, just opened, and it looks like Golden Predator is going to be opening up the Brewery Creek mine again. The Minto mine, which had been closed, is opening back up again. So there's a whole bunch of stuff happening in Yukon. The majors are coming in, mines are being developed, mines are opening, and it's a great district. If there's one thing that is still a limiting factor in Yukon, it's that there's not great infrastructure everywhere. It's in the north. It's one of the Canadian territories, not a province, and so there aren't roads that go crisscrossing all over it like there are for some of the southern provinces, or what you would imagine in many of the U.S. states. And so that can be a limiting factor, but that's not a factor that affects us. We have fantastic infrastructure on our property. We have a road that comes right up onto and through our property. There's never a need for fixed wing aircraft or helicopter support for anything that we're doing. We never need that stuff. We're only 200 kilometers north of Whitehorse, the capital of the territory, which is an industrial capital. All the things that we need are situated there, and we're just a short drive away from that area. In addition to that, you can see the Minto mine from parts of our property, and that would be potentially our closest source of power at a development stage. So, Yukon is a top-tier district. It's moving and shaking right now. It's a fantastic place to be. But one of the main limiting factors can be infrastructure for some projects. That's not a limiting factor for us. And sort of to give you an idea of what a big difference that makes, many Yukon projects have an all-in cost for drilling between $400 and $600 per meter. And in 2017 and 2018, our drilling cost per meter was only $250 all in. And that's an advantage that can translate into a development stage as well.
Yeah, you mentioned that the Yukon might have its challenges with infrastructure, but not with this project, which has excellent infrastructure. But what's a concern for many mining investors is this rise of the jurisdictional risk that we're seeing in Africa and South America and Colombia. So we're kind of seeing that the Yukon is open for business and it provides a safe and secure jurisdiction. And what we're seeing here at Triumph that got me so interested is that this is some of the longest and highest grade drill results that I've seen, gold copper intercepts of a porphyry. So could you discuss for investors or people new to the gold sector the significance of the grades of the significance of a porphyry system, finding a porphyry system and finding these long and high grade results that you have come up with in 2018 and 2019?
Sure. So if you're new to looking at mining and exploration stocks and the sorts of news that are generated from our exploration, One of the most important things that you have to understand is that there are all different kinds of mineral deposits. And when you're talking about gold or gold and copper, you can roughly break those into two types. There's the type where you have very small areas that have very, very high grade mineralization. So this is the kind of thing where there might be a vein in the ground, and in that vein there's a whole bunch of gold, so much gold that you can kind of see it all over the place. And that's the kind of thing that you can mine right from surface or underground, and usually it's part of an underground mining scenario. And the results that you get from those kinds of deposits usually have pretty spectacular sounding gold grades. So, like 100 grams gold or more over a meter, that kind of thing. And the value there is that, you can mine this vein and get a bunch of gold out of it. The other style or the other type of deposit is where you have much, much lower grade spread out over a much, much larger volume. And those are the deposits that actually produce a larger proportion of the world's copper and gold than the small, very rich deposits. So if you think about when you see pictures of very large open pit mines where there's a great big open pit, sometimes these things are kilometers across, kilometers or a kilometer deep. They have their own weather systems sometimes, and they have, sometimes billions of tons of rock. And the amount of gold that's contained in that rock is much, much lower than in the little vein deposits. But overall, the amount of contained metal, the amount of metal that is produced from those kinds of mines is much, much more. And globally, those are the most important mines in the world. The kind of stuff that we're looking for is what we would expect to be a very, very large deposit. And so when you look at the grades that we're calling high grade, they're much lower than what some gold investors might be looking for or think that they're looking for. And that's just because they're used to seeing these vein type deposits. But really, the amount of gold that we're getting from in intersections on our property, even though they're much lower than what the vein intersections would give, for the type of deposit we're looking at, they're exceptionally high grade. So in 2018, we made one of the best intersections of a greenfields porphyry project in the world, and that was over 300 meters of over a gram gold and a close to 0.3% copper, and that had a really high grade core, 2.5 grams gold and almost 0.4% copper. That's the kind of grade that is much, much higher grade than almost any other of these very large, tight styles of deposits around the world. Now, it's only one drill intersection. Well, actually, I think we made 8 very high-grade drill intersections last year, but it's not a mine that we've discovered yet, but it's a demonstration that we have the kind of grade that exceeds most of these large porphyry deposits around the world.
Tony, before we conclude, could you give us any highlights, catalysts, opportunities? What really makes Triumph Gold stand out, in your opinion, for new investors to the sector?
Sure. So, in 2018, we made these really great intersections of high-grade porphyry-style mineralization. And in 2019, we became dedicated to testing to see if those grades extend to depth and if we can connect those things together into a large body. This year, we've now released all of our drill results, and we've just nailed it. We tested 3 separate locations to see if there's deep mineralization, and in each of those locations, we made high-grade drill intersections. And in some of those locations, we found really great evidence that as you get deeper, you get into an area that's even more prospective for porphyry-style mineralization than the stuff that we're already finding near surface. What does that mean, really? Well, it means that as you go to depth, you have the potential to not just continue to have the high-grade mineralization that we're finding, but to piece that together into a very large volume. And that's what we're aiming to do on this property. That's what we're succeeding at doing, and that's what really has the opportunity to increase the value of our stock. That's the kind of thing that as we begin to prove the depth potential of this mineralization, that's what's going to bring even more interest from majors towards our company. That's not the only thing that we've got going on, though, Jeb. We have our property is a very large property, and we have a whole bunch of different showings and even resource areas that we've been quietly advancing. And we've been quietly advancing those in a number of different ways. And they're all at the point now, or there's a number of them at the point now where we're able to drill test some of these ideas. And so doing sort of the inaugural drill test of well-defined exploration targets always has an advantage to shareholders because it has the potential to make a brand new discovery. And if you're in it for, the 5 or 10 bagger, that's when those kinds of opportunities happen, is when there's brand new discoveries. And we've got a bunch of them that we're about ready to start advancing to the drill stage. Another thing is we have another property called Andalusite Peak, which is optioned currently by Rio Tinto. It was their very first property that they've optioned or acquired in British Columbia. We were really quite proud of that. And they did a bunch of work on that property this year, and they'll be passing those results on to us, and we'll be able to tell our shareholders about that. So there's a bunch of catalysts for movement in the stock, both in the near term and in the upcoming years.
Triumph Gold, one of the most exciting stories in the Yukon, high-grade gold, copper, porphyry that's being discovered right in the Yukon, which is getting a lot of interest, especially with the uncertainty with mining all over the world. Get more information at triumphgoldcorp.com. It's traded as TIG on the TSX Venture and as TIGCF. Lots of investors are returning to gold now that it's broken out into 6-year highs, and I believe that this story, backed by a major and with a strong institutional base, could get even a larger following as the company continues to hit on its modeling. So thank you so much, Tony Baresi, president of Triumph Gold, for being here with us today and for discussing this exciting gold, copper, porphyry story in the Yukon.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jed.